the poor say I am rich because of what the Lord has done for us. And now let the weak say I am strong. Let the poor say I am rich because of what God has done for us. Give thanks. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because He's given Yeshua, His Son. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because He's given Yeshua, His Son. And now let the weak say I am strong. Let the poor say I am rich because of what God has done for us. And now let the weak say I am strong. Let the poor say I am rich because of what the Lord has done for us. Give thanks. Give thanks. Give thanks.
Beautiful, you guys. That was a lovely, lovely done.
Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. And He shall lift you up higher and higher. And He shall lift you up. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. And He shall lift you up in the heaven. And He shall lift you up. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. And He shall lift you up higher and higher. And He shall lift you up. I think we're doing that again. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. And He shall lift you up higher and higher. And He shall lift you up.
Woo! Nicely done, you guys. May Yah be praised and glorified and honored. If you are capable of standing, let us stand and say the Shema. Okay. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Lechem kavod malkuto leolam vayed. Yeshua HaMashiach Hu Adonai. Hear, O Israel, Yah is our Elohim, Yah is one. Blessed be his glorious name, whose kingdom is forever and ever. The Messiah Yeshua, he is Lord. Amen. Amen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back to our Bible study in the book of Zechariah. If you have your Bibles, you may open those up to the book of Zechariah. We are in chapter 9. We have not yet read this, but we will read chapter 9 together, and then we'll break it apart and see what we can see. I really enjoy listening to you guys sing. It's so wonderful. You guys online, can you guys hear them singing? Maybe a little bit? Because, yeah, they sound great. We got a couple of singers here. Alicia, are you raising your hand to tell me that, yes, you can hear them sing, or you want to say something?
No, I meant to say I can hear them sing.
Oh, good. Okay. You got to learn how to give the thumbs up. I don't know how to do that myself. Okay. So here's our passage. I would just say, last time we discussed the end of chapter 8, and that had to do with, I extrapolated some to talk about Yah saving people and temporal versus spiritual salvation. I hope that was useful and edifying for you. I thought it was fascinating. But we'll now look today at the burden of Yah's word that is speaking judgment against the people surrounding the nation of Israel, primarily the Phoenicians and the Philistines, which those people are still around to a certain degree, and we will talk about that. But let us read together in chapter 9 of Zechariah. We'll read the whole chapter. It's not terribly long, and then we'll discuss. In Zechariah 9:1, it says this: "The burden of the word of Yah is against the land of Hadrach, with Damascus as its resting place. For the eyes of men, especially of all the tribes of Israel, are toward Yah. And Hamath also, which borders on it, Tyre and Sidon, though they be very wise. For Tyre built herself a fortress and piled up silver like dust and gold like the mire of the streets. Behold, the master will dispossess her and cast her wealth into the sea, and she will be consumed with fire. Ashkelon will see it and be afraid. Gaza too will writhe in great pain. Also Ekron, for her expectation has been confounded. Moreover, the king will perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon will not be inhabited. And a mongrel race, or a mamzer, will dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. And I will remove their blood from their mouth, and their detestable things from between their teeth. Then they also will be a remnant for our Elohim, and be like a clan in Judah, and Ekron like a Jebusite. But I will camp around my house because of an army, because of him who passes by and returns, and no oppressor will pass over them any more. For now I have seen with my eyes. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. And I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the horse from Jerusalem, and the bow of war will be cut off. And he will speak peace to the nations, and his dominion will be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I have set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to the stronghold, O prisoners who have the hope. This very day I am declaring that I will restore double to you. For I will bend Judah as my bow, and I will fill the bow with Ephraim. And I will stir up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece, and I will make you like a warrior's sword. Then Yah will appear over them, and his arrow will go forth like lightning. And Yah Elohim will blow the trumpet, and will march in the storm winds of the south. Yah of hosts will defend them, and they will devour and trample on the sling stones, and they will drink and be boisterous as with wine. And they will be filled like a sacrificial basin, drenched like the corners of the altar. And Yah their Elohim will save them in that day as the flock of his people. For they are as the stones of a crown, sparkling in his land. For what comeliness and beauty will be theirs. Grain will make the young men flourish, and new wine the virgins. Well, how do you feel about that? Good. Does it make you feel good? I think it's meant to, for sure. It's a very encouraging word, but it is also noted as a heavy burden. So, what do you say?
Yes.
Is it a heavy burden? Is it a good word?
Heavy's not a bad thing.
Heavy doesn't have to be a bad thing. Keith, what do you got?
Yeah, I guess if you keep the word of Yah and you're on the right side, it's a pretty good word. But if you're on the wrong side of the judgment, I guess it may not be so good.
I think that's a great way to look at it.
Because what is that word that talks about weightiness or heaviness?
Well, heavy in this case is kavod. That is not this word.
Oh, okay.
Kavod is like glory, but that's heavy, like that's heavy, that kind of way. But this is a different word, and we will talk. It's masad, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, I think there is trouble, great trouble, but also there's some word. There's a word here. I don't mean a specific word, but a word of in this manner of speaking, a word of Yah, that seems to indicate to me that there's bad things happening for the people around. Do you sense something good for them? Anything good there for them? Or is this total flat out destruction, no hope, no nothing, you're done?
Verse 10, they shall speak peace to the nations.
Yeah, verse 10 says he's going to speak peace to the nations. And a little bit earlier on it says the remnant of them will serve. Whether willingly or not, it sounds like not all of them are destroyed. I mean, remember, there has to be, in the previous chapter, I think it was, that there has to be some people from the nations who are coming up to Jerusalem, right? So let's take a look at a couple of things. The enemies of Israel greatly humbled, but there are hints of a bit of salvation. And a couple of key points that I want to point out to you here. This burden is the word masah, and that means a load or a heavy tribute. It's a hard word, so to speak. It's not a totally uplifting word. But would it be uplifting to the Israelites? Yes, I believe it would, obviously, because these people have been tormenting them for quite some time. And that's a good word for them. It's not a good word. It's a heavy word for the Phoenicians that are to the north of Israel and for the Philistines that are to the west of Israel. And a couple of things that I want to point out regarding these places. You know, there's not a ton that you want necessarily, it's not like some wonderful deep study that you're going to do about these places, but I feel like there's some things that we can extrapolate from some of the details about these places that can be instructive also for us today, because unfortunately I think that you're seeing the enemy, it's the same enemies of Israel in the same places. But you also note that some of your text might have said a mongrel race, but others, if you're looking at the Hebrew, it says mamzer, which is like an illegitimate child, a people who are not of a pure race or something like that. It's kind of a weird word. It's only used in like 2 places in the scripture. It's pretty rare. But what I want to point out is a couple of things about these peoples and where they are and what their deal is. So this says in verse 1, this is to Hadrach. Now that's a word, it's a weird word. It's only used here. You don't see it anywhere else in Scripture. Nobody's certain whether this is a place or a region or a person. They have no idea. But Rashi thinks it's a reference to the Messiah, which I think is a little strange. But the reason he thinks that, and this is interesting because as I was pointing out, it's a heavy burden, but there's also seems to be some kind of silver lining there. If you look at that word Hadrach, that is Chet, Dalet, Resh, I don't remember what that last one is. It might be also a Chet. But it's basically 2 words stuck together. Do you recognize either one of those words? Some of my Hebrew students in here, Chad and Rach. Those 2 words together mean sharp and tender. Sharp and tender. It's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird mix of words to make a new word here, Chadrach. And this is why Rashi says that this is speaking about the Messiah. Because when the Messiah comes, he will render judgment to the enemies and destroy mightily, and yet at the end extend a hand of mercy to rule them in a gentle way. He will speak peace to them, as Brett pointed out in verse 10. So I think that's certainly interesting. I know, and you know from studying the scriptures and looking at the character of Messiah, that he does have probably a perfect blend of justice and mercy. He knows just when enough is enough and just when enough is enough of the other kind. That, I think, for those of us in this room who are parents, is the hardest part, is balancing justice and mercy. If you put it one way or the other too much, you can destroy a child. But Yah knows how to do it, and Yeshua obviously does too. So is this a reference to the Messiah? It certainly could be. But what's interesting also is that the text of the Hebrew seems to suggest that this judgment is toward the land of the north, which is called Phoenicia, ancient Phoenicia, and the resting place. If you look at the Hebrew in verse 1, or possibly 2, Damascus is the resting place of this heavy burden. It's like, do you remember a prophecy that is yet to be fulfilled regarding Damascus? Isaiah 17, talking about how at one time Damascus is going to be razed to the ground and completely destroyed, never to be inhabited again. Which is interesting because, according to historians, Damascus is the longest, the place where people have lived there the longest on the whole planet.
It's never been destroyed.
It's never been destroyed, and it is the longest inhabited city on the face of this planet. Damascus is. So, according to Isaiah 17, there's coming a time when Damascus will be razed to the ground, never to be inhabited again. And this certainly seems to evoke that, because this is a great burden on the Phoenician peoples, where it's talking about this judgment resting. This heavy burden is resting specifically on Damascus, if you look at the construct of the Hebrew text there. Now, what's interesting too is you notice that phrase, the eyes of man, and especially of the tribes, are toward Yah. That is a strange statement which puzzles a lot of people, but I think some of the best Hebrew scholars that I researched seem to suggest that this is a time indicator, that this is when the eyes of all mankind, and especially of the tribes of Israel, are toward Yah. That's when this happens. So this is a prophecy. This is giving us a time indication of the prophecies will be filled at the end, when all the eyes of mankind and especially the 12 tribes are toward Yah. They are guiding, He is guiding them. They are looking to Him for guidance and for leadership and for instruction, that doesn't happen very often, even among His own people. Certainly not amongst the nations. Certainly not amongst all mankind. So this is all just picking some details out of just the first verse to kind of give us a little bit of context, I hope. Now, in verses 2 through 8, we get an explanation regarding who these people are, and it speaks a little bit about them in specific. Now, first is the Phoenicians of the north, and I happen to have a map. It's been a long time since I've shared a map with you, but I'm going to pull that up. I apologize that it's kind of small, and see you guys are far away, but you know, these are the mountains north of Israel. You've got the Sea of Galilee. The Jordan River is emptying into the Sea of Galilee, and then it empties out on the south end. This is the Becha Valley that you see between the mountains of Mount Hermon and the Lebanon Mountains. And here you have Hamat. This is one of the cities mentioned. And then up on the sea coast, you have Tyre and Sidon. Those are the places that are mentioned here specifically. Those are to the north of Israel. This is where the ancient Phoenicians lived. That is currently what country? Lebanon partly, and Syria partly. So Lebanon and Syria, that's what we're talking about now. In the modern sense, that's what we're talking about. Now, a couple of suggestions here, a couple of phrases that I want to take a look at. Note that Tyre is, a lot of instruction is given regarding Tyre here. If you look at that, there's quite a bit of detail regarding Tyre, because it's talking about building herself a fortress and piling up silver like dust and gold like the mire of the streets. He'll cast her wealth into the sea in verse 4, and she will be consumed with fire. There's some fascinating history about Tyre, and you know that I am trained as a historian. I love history. It's fascinating stuff. But you know that Tyre was it's on the sea coast now, but it actually used to be an island. It was in the middle of a large lagoon, and you had there was no land bridge to get out to it. You could only get out to it by boat. And it had walls, according to the ancient historians, the walls went right up to the edge of the island and went up 150 feet. This thing was practically, for all intents and purposes, impregnable. They controlled the out towards the sea. They had their own navy to blockade anybody that tried to come in from that direction, and you couldn't come in from land because there is no land. Until Alexander the Great. Because he's clever. He found, by sounding the depths of the water, found a little natural land bridge, and he filled it up. And he made his own land. And he took his large siege engines and started hurling rocks, and then he gathered up a navy of himself and his cohorts, and they blockaded the port. And it took him a long time, but he destroyed that city. He burned half of it to the ground. He deported like 3/4 of the people and slaughtered the others. So it took a severe beating for a while, but it came back, and it's still there today. But and some people would look at this, what happened here, and say, well, that's the judgment of Yah right here. Well, you know how prophecy is. Can you look back through history and see prophecy fulfilled? Many times. Many times. You know that we've talked about this many times ourselves, where it's like, oh, you know, you can... Some people who are preterists, you know what a preterist is? Somebody who looks at the book of Revelation and says, well, yeah, this has been unfolding throughout history. That's why people get tripped up and fall into preterism, in my opinion, is because you can see very clearly fulfillments of prophecy throughout time, but it's not the fulfillment. Right. Like you can see, is there Moshe in Deuteronomy 18, for example, gives you the idea that an anointed one is coming, okay? We're going to talk about some anointing. And then are there other anointed ones? Yes, there are. I mean, Cyrus the Great was a Messiah. If you want to say an anointed one is a Messiah. We had other kings who were anointed as messianic types. So there are all kinds of miniature fulfillments of prophecies. And some people would say, yeah, well, some people say Antiochus Epiphanes might have also fulfilled some of this stuff. I think I think you just need to look at the prophecy. When you look at a specific prophecy, you know that it's usually mentioned in at least one or two other places. Most of the time when there's a prophecy that something is going to happen in the future, it doesn't usually stand alone. There are parallel passages. And the best idea, I think, it can be challenging obviously, but is to take a peculiar topic or a peculiar thing that's supposed to happen and take all of the passages that you think talk about that and put them all together and compare them and see what does the fulfillment of this prophecy look like. Because the fulfillment of the prophecies of the destruction of Israel's enemies, you could look back 70 years ago and see a certain kind of fulfillment. You could look back to the Yom Kippur War and see a certain kind of fulfillment. You could look back to October 7th of last year and see a certain type of fulfillment of this prophecy. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But I think we just need to look at it as a whole, and we need to determine, is this a partial fulfillment? Is this a full fulfillment? David Branton, tell me what's up, brother.
You know, when I was looking at that passage where they translate it as Tyre, I wasn't seeing that. I was seeing Czar, right? And
Yeah.
Czar, part of some of my other studies, comes up over and over and over, right? But it can often also mean enemy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always think of Tsar, though, as when I think of the Russian czars, right? There's like a transliteration thing going on there, but
Yep.
more was in the vein of enemies. The other linkage that I see with the czars has to do with the silver, because it comes up over and over and over. I've been hung up on silver now for a bit.
Yeah.
But the silver part always seems to be payment for something evil. Silver paid for Joseph, or silver paid to betray Jesus, or silver used by the potter's field, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Good
That-
insight.
Just food for thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good insight. Good insight. Thank you, David. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that is brought out here in verse 2, it says that Sidon and Tyre and Sidon, though it be very wise. Now, you look at, obviously wisdom is good. These people, this seems to be a judgment though, because these people seem to be wise in their own eyes. And I would draw your attention to the fact that what is this word wise? That's chakam. And where is that first used? That's always a good thing to look up, as you know. Whenever you see a word and you want to look it up, the first time it was used, it gives you some keen insight on what it means. Now, chakam is first used where? Do you guys see that? I don't know if you have an electronic Bible or a Bible that breaks it down for you. That's in Exodus 1 and 10. Now, what does it say in Exodus 1:10? Pharaoh says, "Come, let us deal chacham, wisely with these Israelites, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there fall out any war, they join unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get up out of the land." Let us deal, it's translated there as shrewdly. Let's deal shrewdly. Now, is that wisdom? That's more like cunning, evil cunning. So that can kind of inform this word to say these people in Tyre and Sidon are very cunning, very shrewd, not in a good way. That's kind of what that suggests to me. They are crafty. to do evil, is what that sounds like to me. It's not saying these people, oh, they're so wise. Yeah, in the world's wisdom perhaps, but more likely crafty and scheming, shrewd in that way. Just FYI, heads up on that. Now, this next in verses 5 through 7, we switch focus from the Phoenicians up of the north to the Philistines. These are you notice when you go back to the book of Samuel, you notice the 4 kingdoms of the Philistines, the 4 city-states of the Philistines. These are them: Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron, and Ashdod. There were actually 5. What's the one that's missing? And it's missing from a lot of them. Remember the 5 lords of the Philistines? These are 4 of them. One is missing. Who's the giant that David fought? Where's he from? Where's he from? Gath. That's correct. Gath is the one that's missing. And in a lot of the prophetic enunciations regarding destruction on the Philistines, Gath is often missing. It's a bit of a mystery. Just heads up for those of you who like a mystery, take a look at it. You'll often see these 4 cities listed, but Gath missing. Just a heads up, think about it, take a look at it. I happen to have another picture for you. It's a bit bigger, but this shows you where these places are. Right in what is today called what? The Gaza Strip. This is basically what would become the Gaza Strip. And it's not obviously for no reason that the Philistines and the Palestinians, it's the same thing. Philistines, Palestinians, it's the same people. Just FYI. Do you know how I'm just curious, do you know how or why modern people call Israel, instead of calling it Israel, they call it Palestine? Not quite. Very close, though. Who is it? I can't see the screen, so I don't know who it is. It's David Branton. David, tell us who it is.
It's Rome.
It's Rome. That's correct. When Rome kicked the Jews out of the land after the rebellion of 150 AD, they renamed the whole place Palestine. Now, that's a terrible insult, because everyone knows that the inveterate enemies of the Jews are the Philistines. Well, the Romans said, well, we're going to kick you out of your own land and we're going to rename it after your ancient enemies. We're going to call it Capitolina Palestina. This is Philistine territory now. So this place has been referred to as Palestine for a long time, but it's an epithet that was derived from the Romans making fun of the Jews after they slaughtered them and exiled them from their own land. So, do you have Philistines, actual Philistines in that land today?
Like
Genetically. Not likely. And I think that is precisely what is being spoken of here in this text when it says a mamzer. Some of your translations will say a bastard race, a mixed people. You can see different methods of interpreting that word. And I think that it's pretty clear. Are the Palestinians Philistines? No, they are not. Although many of them would like you to think that they are, because if they can say that they are, what does that mean? They're part owners. They have ownership of that land. But in all likelihood, the Palestinians are not Philistines. Does anybody know what Palestinians most likely are? Some of them are likely Jordanians, Arabs, maybe some Egyptians mixed in there. It's a very good question. It's almost impossible to trace, but Philistines, very unlikely. David?
I I saw a guy do a study on this topic, and he suggested that they were seafaring, that they came from Crete.
Oh, the Philistines? Yes, that I have heard that before. That is a common understanding of that. That's where the Philistines originally came from, is the island of Crete. The Phoenicians, nobody knows where they came from. In fact, the Phoenicians are one of the oldest people groups on the planet. And if you look at the Phoenician language, have any of you ever heard about this? The Phoenician language, it's remarkably similar to Hebrew. Remarkably similar to Paleo Hebrew.
You know what else is really strange? I don't know if you guys ever listened to Native American tongue, but there's a lot of similarities with Hebrew. That too sounds to me like they sound like they're speaking Hebrew.
That's
there's
certainly
pictographs
possible.
in Native American places
Yeah.
where they have, I think they say Hebrew language.
Yeah, certainly possible. Yeah, that is certainly interesting. But this passage here in verse. In verse 6 it says, a mamzer shall dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. It says that at the beginning of verse 5 that Ashkelon will see it and fear, and Gaza will see it and be very sorrowful. It's almost like what is happening in this time, in this fulfillment of this prophecy, is that something is striking Syria and probably laying waste to Damascus, aka Isaiah 17. The people down south see what is happening up to the north, and they are terrified, which this makes sense to me. I believe that's probably what we're looking at. But then if you look a little bit further in, where was that? Verse 7, take away his blood out of his mouth and his abominations from between his teeth. What do you think of that? What does that make you think of? That Yah is going to take away his blood out of his mouth, speaking of the Philistines as a person, kind of as a personification, and his abominations from between his teeth. Is that like saying these people eat unclean things?
No, it's language, isn't it? I'm talking about, their bloodthirsty tongues, that create.
Oh, yeah, that could be. It's kind of hard to nail down, but I think that some of the construction here seems to suggest that these people are a violent and bloodthirsty bunch. And unfortunately, you still see that today. I mean, it just happened, as I mentioned, in October 7th, We steal across the border and kidnap a bunch of civilians and torture them, rape them, burn them to death, kill babies. It's like, wow, this is some barbarism here. We don't see stuff like that usually. That's like Middle Age, medieval torture kind of stuff. And what's fascinating is to see how the world reacts to that. It lets you know quite clearly that this is a spiritual condition, because no person in their right mind would say, oh, well, this people attacked that people and raped and tortured and killed children and stuff, and okay, now let's, you killed a few people, let's just call a truce now. Most civilized people would say, I think I'm okay with wiping them all out completely.
We do see this happening, though, in our culture, actually.
Where?
It's very discreet.
Who?
Being done in doctor's offices.
Oh, yes.
And actually, it's very comparative to the burning of the babies in the bowel.
You talking about abortion?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, when you think about...
That's pretty barbaric, for sure.
Oh,
That is barbaric, for sure. And it's unfortunate. Yes, that is correct. It's been sanitized and kept out of view and everything, for sure. But yeah, I think that this is what is being discussed here in this section regarding blood from between the teeth and the abominations. I think it's likely a reference to savage animalism. That they're more like animals than people. And I think it kind of, what's interesting is if you go to, I believe that there is a reference coming up here, not directly to Noah, but the word, your king is coming to you righteous and just. This is what was spoken of Noah. I'm coming to that in a second, where that word just is first used in Genesis 6:9, where it says Noah is found just before the fall of the rain and everything. But I look at that and I think to myself, this people who were on the planet before the time of the flood, it was like Father said, this is kind of messed up to the point where there's no redemption here. We just need to flush the toilet. You just don't let stuff like that float around. You flush it. And so, unfortunately, I think that is the point to which we are reaching now, where, as Cindy said, great evil happening in doctors' offices, great evil happening here and there, great evil happening in the world where some people can be so savage to behave in that way. I understand war. War is brutal. People die. Hopefully they don't rape and pillage and murder, bash babies' heads in with rocks. And, this is savage. This is savage type stuff. And it kind of reminds me of the days of Noah, where it's like the whole earth is filled with violence. And Father says it's just time to flush the toilet again, this time with fire. Remember also that those things which can withstand the fire are put to the fire. And those things which cannot are cleansed with water. This is in the book of Leviticus, which is what the period that we're studying right now in our Torah portions. So Father cleanses once with water, and he cleanses once with fire. It's coming right up. Who is it? It's Tracy Tim. Tracy, I'm so delighted to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. We're still studying Noah in our little Bible study that we're doing on Shabbats. And something that, as I was studying, that was brought to my attention regarding this perceived destruction when, he's cleansing the earth and destroying all flesh because all flesh destroyed his ways. There's actually a judging in the same way that they judged going on there because the same words are being used. But I started thinking about that with regard to all these other times when he's like go in and wipe out these entire, civilizations and whatnot. All the times he's done this. And then we get people like, with the more of a, Christian mainstream mindset that says the God of the Old Testament is mean and Jesus is nice and he's coming to save us all. God was not destroying life, he was preserving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is how we really must retrain our brains. Because had he not done that, what would happen to the righteous seed? So he is not the God of the dead, he is the God of the living. So these people were not living. And so he's preserving life, which he found in Noah, and that is why Noah found grace in his eyes, because he had a heart that was willing to do the will and to preserve the ways of God, which is this righteous and seed line that's going to come through the Messiah. So anyway, I just think that's really important for us to retrain our minds to think he is preserving life. Every time he does that, he is the God of life.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I was listening to something this week and somebody started bringing up Calvinism and how, some people are just destined for hell. I'm like, I don't see it that way. I see, that mankind has a mind of his own, and he is determined to steal, kill, and destroy, and he is headed that direction at all speed, will just pell-mell, just running straight for the cliff to jump off and kill himself and anybody he can take with him. That is what mankind is devolving into. And Father is rescuing people, just exactly as Tracy was saying. He is in the business of snatching people who are otherwise running pell-mell towards the edge of a cliff and kind of grabbing them by the neck and smacking them around a little bit and go, are you sure you want to do that? That's what it's like to be saved, if you want to look at saved in that direction. It's literally like Father is smacking you around a bit And that, I think, is why you see people who come to salvation often do so at the end of their own rope. How common is that? I mean, yes, there are some of us who were born saved. We've been to church every day of our lives. Mama brought me to church in a little basket, and I've been there ever since. Anyway, seriously, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. You have, hopefully, if you've been living that close to Father for that long, you have had to not deal with a whole bunch of crap that the rest of us have had to deal with. If you did that, fantastic. That is awesome. That is awesome. But unfortunately, a lot of us stumbled around and did stupid stuff and paid the price for it. And he had to grab us around the neck and say, hey, do you realize where you're headed? Tracy's absolutely right. He is in the business of rescuing people. But, you know, it reminds me right now of, would you say, and this is just my fancy playing this out there for you, would you say that the Jews returning to their native land in 1947-48 and establishing a new kind of a, now I know that some of you were like, yeah, that's not legit. Okay, whatever, that's fine. And I'm not saying it's legit either. What I am saying is they're there. Some of them are worshiping the Father, not according necessarily to the Spirit of truth, but they are trying. May Yah bless them and show them the truth. But here's the important part, I think, that it kind of relates to this is, you know, they're ruling these places. They have a good deal of authority over the West Bank, over Gaza. They have a good deal of weight that they can throw around against Syria and Lebanon. Do you think that there's a certain, just a little bit of a prophetic shadow picture of Messiah ruling in Israel and taking care of the people around him? How do the Jews feel about these people around them? What do you continuously hear them say? We want to live in peace. Do you notice that they're speaking peace? Do you notice that in this passage as well? That Yah is sending this king who is going to speak peace to the nations. Now, the Jews are continuously saying, look, man, stop trying to murder us and we can live in peace. Now, that's obviously not going to happen, but they are ruling some of these places with a fair amount of compassion as you can be with people who would like to murder you and your family. They're showing remarkable restraint. And it just made me think for a moment, might that be somewhat like it would be when Yeshua is ruling this place, that he's got people who hate his guts and they have to just play nice because they're forced to? Obviously, that's going to happen again. You can look at Revelation in 20, because at the end of the millennium, that they get rallied, the troops get rallied up, and they're like surrounding the camp of the saints, and let's kill them all. Let's do it. Let's get rid of these people once and for all. It's not done. It's not going to be done for some time yet. But I just wondered if maybe there was a little bit of a mini or a micro fulfillment of this even now. Now, in verse 8, we have there's some fascinating stuff about him, surrounding the camp of the saints, so to speak. He camps about his house because of the army and because of him that passes by and returns. Does that remind you of anything? Because of the army and because of those who pass by and return?
It reminds me of the end time when it's talking about how they're going to circle the camp toward the very end of times.
Yeah.
And also the to and fro is, Hasatan with him.
Right.
The to and fro thing.
Right.
Something with the to and fro.
Yeah. There's some interesting things going on here. I would recommend that you look at the latter half of Daniel chapter 11. This is about the king of the north and the king of the south, because there's a lot of language about somebody passing through Israel and then coming back. Now, we know, those of you who studied prophecy and history, you can look at those passages in Daniel 11 and go, well, that's remarkably similar to Antiochus Epiphanes, fighting with the Ptolemaic kingdom down in Egypt. Yes, absolutely. There's another one of those micro fulfillments of the prophecy. Keith, go ahead, buddy.
Hey, did you guys stop doing the mic? Because I can't always understand who you're talking with and what they said. I'm just trying to catch that other half of the conversation.
Was someone talking here a second ago?
Oh, I think I said something, but we weren't, they didn't have.
Yeah, but I couldn't understand her rebuttal to you or whatever she said to you. I
What
couldn't
did you
understand.
say? There's a microphone right behind you. Sorry, Keith. She doesn't remember what she said. I apologize.
We were talking about.
Oh, circling the camp, yeah.
Yeah, circling the camp. I said I thought it reminded me, because he asked what did it remind us of, and it said it made me think of the very end time of Armageddon, when it says that all the people that are against God are going to come and try to surround the city, and then the fire is going to come down and destroy them.
Right.
It reminded me of that, and also the to and fro. The fact that it mentions those who are going to and fro makes me think even more that it could be that type of situation, because those are going to be people who are against God, I think, probably.
Right. Thank you. Was that better, Keith?
Much better when you have the mic passed.
If you guys, thank you, Keith, for bringing that to my attention. And if anyone out there online notices that in the future, put up your hand and tell me, because I often forget. I apologize. But no, I think that also reminded me of Daniel chapter 11, particularly verses, say, 20 to 45. And as I was saying, a lot of this seems like it might have been partially fulfilled, at least by Antiochus Epiphanes in the days of the Maccabees. But it also, I think, because there's some certain parts of that history in Daniel chapter 11 which very clearly do not apply to Antiochus Epiphanes. And that's the most amazing thing to me about prophecy. It's like something can happen and it hits like 8 out of 10 points. It's like, that's it. Nope, not quite. It has to hit all 10 points or it's not the ultimate fulfillment. But you know how it is with the fulfillment of prophecy. It starts small. As Holyssa Alewine would say, it starts as a seed prophecy in the Torah. And then the first time it comes around, it's fulfilled in a small way. And then an even bigger way. And then an even bigger way. And then an even bigger way. And people are like, that's the ultimate fulfillment. No. Look more carefully at all of the details and you'll see that's still not yet the fulfillment. The big one. And I think I look at these things and I say, man, what is the ultimate fulfillment going to look like? I think that when we reach the end of the age, between the time of the gathering into the kingdom and the moving into the 8th day, so to speak, that's when you're seeing things that are just astonishing. Things that you wouldn't even believe it if somebody told you. You wouldn't believe it if you'd seen it with your own eyes. That's where things get weird. Things get really powerful. You start seeing the full fulfillment of all of the prophecies of the Bible, and that's when people are like, holy mackerel. That's cool. You looking forward to seeing that, Brett?
Well, I'd like to be in the hidden place.
You would like to be in... Brett says he would like to be in the hidden place when some of that... Yes, sir. When some of that stuff goes down, I would like to be in the hidden place. Yes, absolutely. That would be great. So this passage obviously probably has multiple fulfillments, and I do think, however, that this passage is discussing the ultimate fulfillment. And I would, Cindy was talking about Revelation 20, 7 through 9, and I actually happen to have that on the screen. I'd like to share that with you because this actually shows you what we're dealing with when it actually happens at the end of the millennium. It says in Revelation 20 and 7, when the 1,000 years are completed, the Satan, or the adversary, will be released from his prison, and he will go out to deceive the nations at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. Their number is like the sand of the sea, and they came up over the surface of the earth and surrounded the encampment of the saints, the beloved city. Then fire came down from heaven and consumed them. There's no battle. There's no battle, and I think that this is really important. This is really important because when you come to verse 9 and you start talking between 9 and 10, verses 9 and 10, you start to see Yeshua. It's pretty clearly Yeshua. And you start to see something curious. And I want you to pay attention to this because this is the last thing I'm going to cover for this evening. Who is it? It is Carla. What's up, Carla?
If you don't mind, can you hear me okay? Okay. I just wanted to share another little idea of a mini fulfillment about what we've just talked about before you go on to that last
Yeah,
part.
yeah, absolutely.
Couple things. Like you mentioned Alexander the Great. And my understanding is that he actually, when he came to take Tyre and Sidon, they had been such powerful cities that no one had been able to take them.
Yes.
But as you mentioned, he did do them relatively quickly. And the Philistines were seeing that happen. And so they were scared. So you look at the verse 5, they see it and they fear. And the listing of the cities there are actually the order of them being taken by Alexander the Great. That's how he came through.
Yep.
And so there's a really interesting perspective by Josephus, and he's an historian.
Yep.
And when the people in Jerusalem saw that the Assyrians and the Philistines were all being taken, and they are such big, massive, tough people, they were scared.
Yeah.
And so they thought, well, they're going to be taken for sure. Well, in Josephus, he shares that the high priest in Jerusalem at the time was, he had a dream. And in the dream, it was like God was telling him, everybody in town, you all put on white clothes, and high priest, you put on your priestly garment, and you go out and you meet Alexander. And he said, then you'll be fine. Well, so when Alexander came to Jerusalem, they actually did exactly that. And so here, as he's coming up, all these people in white are coming out of the city, led by the high priest in full gear, to greet him. And when he came, he got off his horse, and he went and he worshiped what appeared to be worshiping the high priest. Well, the people around him said, "Why are you doing this? This is not the norm." And he said, I'm not worshiping the high priest. I'm honoring his God, the God of the high priest, because he also had a dream. And in the dream, he saw a bunch of people coming out to meet him dressed in white. And he knew that that was a peaceful thing. And according to Josephus, then, the agreement was that no one would harm anyone, and the Jews could continue to follow their Torah law versus his law and not be taxed.
Yep.
That's the little story.
That's a fabulous story, and thank you for sharing that, Carla. That is in Josephus' Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 10, I believe. If you want to look that up, it's a fascinating story. Thank you for sharing that, Carla. That's awesome. So, last item for the evening is taking a look at verses 8 and 9, where the king arrives for the first time, and I'm just going to read that for you here. It says in Zechariah chapter 9, let's just look at 9, chapter 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout in triumph, daughter Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and bearing salvation, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Now, this is, you can tell that when the disciples were in Jerusalem going to one of the feasts, they actually Yeshua told them, go and get this donkey, and Yeshua went and rode on the donkey, and they said, thus was fulfilled the passage. This is the passage that was fulfilled. So the interesting thing about this is a couple of things. Number one, this is not really an introduction to Yeshua per se, because other prophets had written about Yeshua rather dramatically, especially like in Isaiah 53. But this one's pretty cool, and it's pretty clear also. But you notice a couple of things about this, okay? The descriptors that are used here for this king, I think, are pretty fascinating. Number one, he is just. Number two, he is bearing salvation. Number three, he is lowly. And number four, he is riding on a young donkey. Okay, so those are four things that are used to describe this king that is coming to them. Number one, I mentioned a little bit ago that the word just is first used in Genesis 6 and 9, where Noah is found to be just or righteous. Okay, so that's interesting. Number two, he is bearing salvation. We talked last week about the first instance of the word salvation being used, and this is where Moses saves Yethro's daughters from the evil shepherds who were trying to steal the water from the flock. And then he is lowly. This is first used in Exodus 22:25, where it says, do not charge interest to the poor, the lowly. Those are the three characteristics that are mentioned regarding this king who is going to arrive on a young donkey's colt. Two things that I would have you consider in this passage. Number one, does this king remind you of something or someone? Who is this king sound kind of like? Who do you know in Scripture that is righteous and just, David, brings salvation, and is also humble? Well, Yeshua, yeah. No. Yeshua hasn't been born yet.
You're talking about Old Testament.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking back in history. No, of course this is Yeshua. But if these listeners are listening to this guy with this prophecy, who would they think he's talking about? Keith?
Well, when King David was on his deathbed and there was one of his other sons was trying to take the throne, he put Solomon on the donkey and sent him out with the priest Zadok. And they went out and anointed him, and all Jerusalem saw that it was just and that was the king, the righteous king to be.
Yes, that's a great insight. Great insight. I like that. And he's talking about David when he was about to die. He put Solomon on a young donkey. He's talking about Solomon being a king. And I think that if you look at the history of the leaders of Israel, you've got just a couple of shining examples of things going pretty well. David.
First of all, I want to say that was beautiful, Keith.
Yeah.
And the second thing I'll say was, I was thinking of Melchizedek.
Melchizedek, yes, that's a good insight. Absolutely. And in fact, that might be one of the earliest ones. So I think that to a Jew living in the time of the ministry of Zechariah, listening to someone who is bringing salvation, who is lowly and humble, and who also is, righteous and just. What does that remind you of? Where's one of your first examples? Somebody said it in here a minute ago. I'll just go ahead and tell you. It's Moses. It's Moses. Moses was just in a certain degree. Yah sent Moses to deliver salvation to his people, and it says that Moses was the most humble or lowly, ana or ani in this case, human on the planet. So why would there be a comparison between Moses and Yeshua? Did you know of anybody in the New Testament that compares Moses and Yeshua? Here's the fascinating thing. If you're not aware of it, I would highly recommend that you check it out. I personally believe that the whole Gospel of John is a comparison between Yeshua and Moses. Notice that the miracles that he notes are directly correlated to the miracles that Moses did. Moses turns the water into blood. Yeshua turns the water into wine. Start following the miracles that are recorded in the Gospel of John and compare them to the miracles that Moses did in front of Pharaoh. John, I believe, is making a direct comparison between Yeshua and Moses, and it's for this purpose, because there have only ever been two people on this planet that are like Moses and Yeshua. What is so unique about Moses and Yeshua? It's David. What's up, David?
Well, similar in Moshe's name, which is like a messenger of kind of like the flame, if you will, but he's a messenger of the flaming bush. Mashiach is like messenger. Hamashiach is like the messenger of the bush, and there's a in it which implies burning bush, right?
Nice. Nice. That's a good one. That's a good one. Osmundo, what do you got for me, brother?
They both survived the massacre of the innocents.
Hey, there you go. Moses and Yeshua both survived the massacre of the innocents. That's a good insight. Thank you for that. Tracy?
So this is interesting that you brought that up about John, the book of John, and having it being related to this comparison. Because in verse 8 of Zechariah 9, he says, I will encamp among my house, something like that. And that's, I was going to bring this up earlier, but I just was like, meh. But now I'm like, okay, I should, because this is what's going on is he came to tabernacle among us. So that's another, I think, connection to the Messiah. And in John 1, it says, this word became flesh, which is the Messiah, and tabernacled among us. And we beheld his glory full of grace and truth.
Yep.
And then it says, I'm skipping down so you can kind of get the context of this, that out of his fullness, so out of that fullness, we have all received grace on top of grace, or grace for grace. For the Torah came through Moses, but grace and truth came through, no but. The Torah came through Moses, grace and truth came through Yehoshua Messiah.
Yep.
So it's not a exchange, it's a comparison. I think it's saying we received this fullness of grace and truth, and the Messiah is coming to make that full.
I 100% agree with you, and it's delightful that you brought that up, because you're right. There is no but in that passage. It does not say Moses, brought us the Torah, but Yeshua brought us grace and truth. It simply says Yeshua brought grace and truth. It's like they're stacking on top of each other. Angela, did you want to say something? The other microphone there behind you. I don't want Keith mad at me.
Can I say something before she...
Oh, please. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that word, it's basically, he's saying it's grace and grace. They're both forms of grace.
Right.
And I think it's tied into this word encamp, because the Hebrew word for grace is hen, and this word camp or encamp is henah. And they're both closely related. So there's a connection there with encamping and grace and him coming to tabernacle among us.
Excellent, excellent. Angela?
You asked about Moses and Yeshua, and what I was thinking that Moses spoke with him face to face.
Yes.
And then Yeshua said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. So it's almost like they were the most, pure conduit between the Father and the people.
Absolutely. And the book of Hebrews will tell you that he calls it a mediator of a covenant. Moses is a mediator. He, aside from Yeshua, was the only other mediator on the planet. He hears directly from Father, and he dispenses the message that he gets. No other prophet operates that way. None. They're seeing things in a vision, or they're hearing something and they're saying, this is what Yah has told me to tell you. It's very limited. But with Moses, it's like straight up. I don't talk in riddles to my servant Moses. I talk like a guy's talking to him face to face. Yeshua, same deal. There are only two people ever on the planet who have been that. It's Moses and Yeshua. But here's the difference, I think, that's fascinating, and this is why people have puzzled over, why are we talking about this donkey? Where did this donkey come from? Why did somebody throw a donkey in there? I think that the answer to that question is in verse 10. Notice that it says, I'm going to cut off the chariot from Ephraim. I'm going to cut off the horse from Jerusalem, the bow. What do you notice here? Somebody was about to say something. Is it you? Did you want to say something? Put the mic closer to your pie hole.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to mention the part about, so the Jews actually believe that Moses will remain the most humble man, even more humble than Mashiach. But the funny thing about Jews, when you listen to some of the things they teach, they believe that they'll say in argument that there's not just the Mashiach, like there's not just one, but they do say the Mashiach, okay? They'll blanket and say, well, there's been many Mashiachs,
Yes,
right? So
yes.
like there's not just this ultimate one.
Right.
The difference is Yeshua is not a man. That's the problem. So he will be more humble than Moses because he is
Yeah.
the spirit man.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is going to be the big difference
Sure.
there, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Definitely. So Moses is representing
Yeah.
the concreteness of us, the
Right.
material side of us, and Yeshua is the spirit
Right,
that breathes into
absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think, and I'll just this last thing that I'll throw out there before it gets too late. Hey, Carla or someone back east, the time changed recently. Is it later there? It's gotten even later, so good, sweet mother of pearl. It's like really late back in Minnesota. I apologize, Carla.
Yeah.
Yes, I apologize. Chill out, man.
Yeah, we'd like to know about this
I'm going to tell. Well, I don't have some great mystery riddle about the donkey. I just think that I have some insight. I'm hoping it'll be useful. Here's the thing. What does a donkey represent versus a horse? Well, you can carry stuff, but what is a horse for? A horse is for war. What's a donkey for? A donkey is more peaceable, and it's just for travel. It's more of a domesticated animal. Who is that? Is that Maureen? No? Keith. Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
A donkey is a servant.
A donkey is a servant. Yes, that's a great point. And when you compare the war bow and the horse and the chariot, and then you look at this passage in Revelation chapter 20, where this huge army surrounds the encampment of the city of God, and all of a sudden fire comes down. What does that mean? That means that the Messiah can rule in peace, and he doesn't need warlike powers because his Father completely destroys his enemies. You notice in the book of Revelation that he destroys his enemies with the sword that comes out of his mouth. That's his words. The fire comes down from heaven to destroy the enemies like they did with Elijah calling down fire from heaven. He is humble to the sense, I don't need to be a warlike king. As a matter of fact, that's why David was not able to build the temple of Yah, because he had blood on his hands. You can't have a righteous king with blood on his hands. So Yeshua, I believe that this donkey symbolizes him ruling in peace. His enemies are destroyed, but he didn't really have to do it, so to speak. Not directly. I think the Father is destroying his enemies, and this sword comes out of his mouth, and the angels are doing different things. I think that the Messiah, in a certain sense, has to keep his hands clean, or he's going to become like David, not able to inhabit the temple, not able to fulfill his complete ministry as a king of peace and yet be righteous. Somebody hand the microphone back, thank you, Steve, to Ella.
I'm not sure if you said this or if this is related, but I just think it's interesting how in the first coming of Messiah, he was on a donkey, and in the second coming, he's going to be on a horse, which
yes,
is more
that's an excellent
related.
insight. Excellent insight. So there's, a white horse. So there's going to be some judgment when he arrives. It's just, some of the passages that are described there make me feel like maybe he's not directly involved. And I would say look into that a little bit more. I mean, I know he's involved, but it just makes me think, I had to compare that with David. where David was like not able to do what he wanted to do because of the war that he had been engaged in. But I think, I think it was Keith mentioned that, David gave a donkey to his son Solomon to put him send him off to Jerusalem. And I think that both David and Solomon are a good precursor of a Messiah, an anointed king who's ruling in righteousness and peace. They were both terribly flawed, so those are like mini fulfillments. But that's, I think, that's it. That's all I have for you. I apologize for keeping you too late.
It's interesting. All the people that
You don't have a microphone. You can't talk. Sorry. Go ahead. Thanks, Steve.
Well, I was just going to say, all the people in Scripture that are types or shadows of Messiah, you need a lot of them
Yeah.
to display all of who he is.
Right.
And I never thought of
That kind of gives you a little picture here and there of that certain type of character. But frankly, I think this is really encouraging for the Jews, and it needs to be, because they have had a whole string of leaders of their nation for about 500 or 600 years or more. And it's just been a whole series of catastrophes. You got a king that seems to be righteous, and then he does something stupid. You got a king who seems to be on the right trajectory, then he does something stupid, and it's like one continuous human failure after. Moses himself doing so great and then does something stupid. We need one who is just, bringing salvation, and yet is humble and has soft power. Maybe that's how you could look at the donkey, soft power.
It's restrained.
Restrained power. I think that might be a good way to look at it. Yes, there you go. Power under control is like meekness.
Restraining. I'm just learning about that right now. That's
Yeah. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that was